At Maplewood High School, a bright and polished place in the peaceful suburbs of Boston, Maya Anderson was new. She didn't talk much, was overweight, and kept to herself. To some students there, Maya was the perfect target. They thought they could turn her into a joke without consequences. The teasing started in the gleaming tiled hallways, continued during the noisy lunch period, and quickly spread, making Maya the school's favorite target. And when Maya finally tried to speak up, the adults told her to ignore it. So the next time they came for her, she didn't walk away anymore. What happened next didn't just flip the power dynamic inside the school. It exposed what the staff had ignored, what the bullies never expected, and what Maya had been holding back the entire time. Maya Anderson had learned early that silence could be a shield. It didn't stop the staring or the whispers, but it gave you space just enough to keep people from thinking they could reach you. On her first day at Maplewood High, she walked through the front gates with her backpack slung over one shoulder and her eyes lowered just enough to avoid direct contact without looking weak. The school looked like something out of a brochure. Shiny floors, pristine banners, and polished hallways that smelled like lemon-scented cleaner and quiet judgment. A student aide showed her to her locker without saying much beyond, "Here," then walked off like it was a chore. Maya didn't mind. She wasn't here to make friends, and she wasn't looking for a warm welcome. She just wanted to finish the year without drawing too much attention, without becoming a target again. But it didn't take long. The tension settled on her shoulders before her second period. A cough behind her sounded suspiciously like a pig snort, then another one. When she turned, two boys in varsity jackets walked by, laughing eyes locked on her. One of them nudged the other. "Careful," he said loud enough for her to hear. "Earthquake zone." The other chuckled and tossed a sideways glance her way. She's going to need a whole new wing just to fit in gym class. Maya didn't flinch. She kept walking, kept her chin up, and stared straight ahead, but her ears burned. It got worse by the hour. In biology, the girl next to her leaned back and whispered, "Hope that stool's reinforced," before turning to her friend and giggling. Maya's jaw tightened. She didn't turn her head, she just kept writing. Even as the laughter spread behind her like a slow ripple through the room, she didn't say a word. When one of the other girls dropped a candy bar wrapper onto her lap in history class, mouthing, "Oops," like it was an accident, nor when someone slipped her name onto the lunchroom's dry erase joke board with "Maya Big Mac Extra Cheese, please," scrolled in red marker beneath it. By lunchtime, she sat alone by the vending machines, tucking her legs beneath the bench, her tray balanced carefully. Two girls from her first period math class sauntered past, laughing loud enough to draw attention, looking right at her without bothering to hide it. "Is that all she's eating?" one said mockingly. "That's not enough to keep her from fainting? Let her starve." The other replied, "Let's wait for the bleachers." Maya looked down at her food and didn't respond. She didn't move until they were gone. She picked up her tray, dumped it without a word, and left the cafeteria with her back straight. In gym class, the cruelty turned deliberate when her name was called during roll. Someone oinked behind her. The sound was sharp, cutting through the echo of sneakers and bouncing balls. A second followed, a boy's voice smug and taunting. "Don't let her run. It'll crack the floor." Laughter broke out from the bleachers. The gym teacher blew her whistle but didn't say anything about the noise. She just moved on. Maya felt every breath tighten in her chest, not from running, but from holding back the storm brewing inside her. It wasn't the first time she'd been the punchline, but Maplewood wasn't just another school. It was the kind of place where cruelty dressed itself up as humor, and everyone looked the other way. By the time the final bell rang, Maya walked with the heavy calm of someone who'd spent the day swallowing every insult. She moved slow through the parking lot, each step deliberate, steady, like she was walking underwater. That's when she saw them. Three girls leaning against the flagpole, their arms crossed, smug smiles painted across their faces. Varsity jackets, matching lip gloss, and the look of girls who thought they ran the world. One of them tilted her head as Maya approached, pretending to look thoughtful. "Think she can fit on the bus?" she said loud and clear. "Might have to get her own." The second girl smirked. "Nah, just tie her to the roof like luggage." The third pulled out her phone and snapped a picture, without shame. Smile, girl. You're going to go viral. Maya didn't stop walking. She didn't look at them. She kept moving, face still hands in her pockets, eyes fixed on the sidewalk ahead. She crossed the street and kept walking until their voices faded behind her. But the picture they'd taken that on purpose, and in that quiet moment with her back to them and the sun casting long shadows across the pavement, she knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow would be worse. Maya didn't speak about it that night. She sat at the kitchen table while her Aunt Clara cooked the smell of garlic and onions drifting through the house. Music playing low in the background, she stirred her food slowly, not out of hunger, but for something to do with her hands, nodding now and then at her aunt's casual conversation, but offering little in return. Aunt Clara didn't push. She never did. She'd raised Maya long enough to know that some things needed time before they were spoken out loud. The next morning, Maya woke up earlier than usual and moved slower than she had the day before. There was nothing wrong with her body, no injury or sickness, but she felt like every muscle had absorbed the weight of yesterday's silence. She dressed carefully. Hoodie zipped halfway and tied her hair back the way she always did when she didn't want to be noticed. She walked into the school building with her head down, but her eyes alert, already scanning faces, already measuring the mood. The first sign came at her locker. Tucked into the slits in the door, crumpled just enough to make sure she'd have to touch them, were candy wrappers, Snickers. Twix, a pack of powdered donuts. She pulled them out and tossed them in the garbage without a word. A girl across the hall nudged her friend and whispered, "Guess someone's got breakfast." The friend giggled and added, "Probably still hungry." Maya didn't look at them. She didn't need to. She knew their faces already. The way their expressions barely changed when they said these things, like it wasn't meant to hurt, like it was all just part of the daily script. First period was quiet, but second brought more of the same. Someone had drawn a cartoon on the corner of the whiteboard right where she always sat, a crudely shaped figure, big and round, with a speech bubble that said, "Feed me." No one said who did it. The teacher erased it without comment, but Maya saw the smirks around the room. The joke had already done what it was meant to do. In the hallway between classes, she heard her name in a low chant from a group of boys near the water fountain. "May a big, may a big." The rhythm was mocking. "Dragged out," said, in the kind of sing-song voice little kids use to tease each other. When she passed them, one of them made a loud snorting sound and stepped back dramatically, like she'd nearly stepped on his foot. "Damn, girl," he said, hands up like he was trying to defend himself. "Next time. Warn us before you roll through." The others laughed, and one slapped the locker door for emphasis. Maya kept walking, eyes fixed ahead, ears burning, but her face still unreadable. Gym class was worse. The gym teacher made the mistake of letting the class choose teams again. Maya stood in the same spot as always, arms folded over her chest, waiting. The line of captains. Two boys and one of the girls who always hung around Tiffany looked right through her. Names were called, people ran to their teams, and Maya stayed where she was until the last pick was down to her and a boy with a limp. One of the captains sighed. "Fine," he said, pointing at Maya. "Come on, just try not to fall on anyone." The comment drew more laughter than it should have. Maya didn't respond. She just joined the team and played the game, the same way she always did, quiet-focused, holding herself back more than necessary, just to avoid drawing more attention. When the game ended, someone called out, "We would have won if the floor wasn't slanted," and a second voice replied, "It's not slanted. It's just struggling under all that weight." In the locker room, Maya took longer than usual to change, waiting until most of the others had cleared out. But two of the girls lingered behind both of them, standing by the sinks, fixing their hair and pretending not to notice her. She knew their names now, Madison and Brittany. They were always around, the ringleader, always whispering, always smiling when someone else crossed the line. Madison glanced at her in the mirror and smirked. "You know," she said, casually brushing her hair back, "you could probably drop like 20 lump sums if you just skipped lunch for a week." Brittany didn't even try to hide her laugh. "Try a month." Maya finished lacing her shoes and stood up without saying anything. She walked past them like they were ghosts, like their voices didn't exist, like they hadn't already spent 2 days trying to chip away at something they didn't understand. By the time she reached her last class, her stomach hurt. Not from hunger, not from nerves, but from everything she hadn't said, from every response she held back. Then, just before the bell rang, it happened. A paper was taped to the front of her desk. She peeled it off slowly, eyes scanning the edges, then stopped when she saw her own face, poorly photoshopped onto the body of a pig snout, and all underneath giant bold letters that read, Maplewood High Annual Eating Contest. Special guest appearance by Maya Anderson. She stared at it, then turned it over without a word, and folded it slowly into a square. Her heart pounded not from embarrassment anymore, but from something deeper, heavier, something ready to shift. Around her, the classroom buzzed with stifled laughter and the click of phone cameras. The teacher never looked up. Maya didn't say anything. Not yet. But when she stood up and walked to the office, paper in hand, she wasn't walking like someone who was broken. She was walking like someone counting every step. Maya walked into the office, with the folded paper gripped tightly in her hand, her fingers pressing deep creases into the corner as if she needed to feel something solid, something sharp against her skin to stay steady. The front desk assistant glanced up from behind the computer, offered the same half-smile she gave everyone, and asked if Maya needed a late pass. "I need to see Principal Harrison," Maya said, voice-level calm, in the way that only comes when someone has passed through the embarrassment and landed squarely in quiet rage. The woman blinked clearly, not expecting that tone. "Is this an emergency?" "Yes," Maya replied without hesitation. She was told to wait. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The woman behind the desk called into the back office again, her voice hushed this time. And finally the principal's door opened, revealing a tall man with a receding hairline and a face that always seemed mildly inconvenienced. He didn't smile when he saw Maya. He just waved her in like he was already tired of whatever she was going to say. She stepped inside and stood in front of his desk while he sat down, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt like they were more important than the student in front of him. The office smelled like stale coffee and printer paper. Diplomas lined the back wall, and a stack of untouched yearbooks sat near the window. "Maya, right," he said. "What can I do for you?" She didn't answer right away. She unfolded the flyer carefully and placed it on his desk. His eyes flicked to it. He stared for a few seconds longer than she expected, long enough to read every word, to take in the image, the title, the laughter behind it. Then he looked up and offered a polite shrug that made her chest tighten. "Teenagers can be cruel," he said, "but the best thing you can do is ignore them. Don't give them the reaction they want." Maya didn't move. "Sir, this was taped to desks," she said evenly. "People are passing it around on their phones. I've been followed, laughed at, and mocked since I got here. This," she tapped the paper, "isn't just a joke. This is targeted. It's harassment." He leaned back in his chair, exhaled loudly, and gestured toward the paper like it was beneath his attention. "I understand it's upsetting," he said. "But part of being in high school is learning how to deal with people who don't always treat you well. If I punished every student who made a joke, this entire school would be suspended." Maya's fingers curled into fists at her sides, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not asking you to suspend anyone," she said. "I'm asking you to do something. I am doing something," he said quickly. "I'm telling you how to handle it, rise above it. Maya, don't let it get under your skin. They'll move on to someone else once they realize they're not getting a rise out of you." She stared at him, her heart thudding slow and heavy behind her ribs. She felt something sink inside her. Not the pain of being humiliated, but the sharp, clean break that comes when you finally understand that no one is coming to help. "Right," she said, and turned to leave. He didn't stop her. He didn't ask for the flyer. He didn't even look up again. She left the office the same way she came in, silent, composed. But something in her steps had changed. The quiet she wore so tightly, the armor she thought would protect her, had cracked, and underneath it something else had started to move. When she got home, she didn't speak. She went straight to her room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Her bag slumped beside her shoes, still on hoodie, bunched at the elbows. She stayed that way for a long time, frozen in thought, watching her own anger grow into something heavier than sadness. Her Aunt Clara found her like that just after 6. The gym had closed early and she'd brought home takeout, expecting to eat on the couch and talk through the day like they usually did. But when she saw Maya's face, her expression changed. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Maya didn't answer at first. She just handed her the flyer, still slightly creased, the image still just as vile. Aunt Clara unfolded it slowly, her eyes narrowing as she took it in. "They put this up at school?" she asked. Maya nodded. "They laughed. They filmed me." Aunt Clara's jaw tightened. She set the paper down carefully, then looked at Maya with a stillness that came from years of fighting her own battles. "And what did the school do?" Maya's voice was hollow now. "Told me to ignore it. Told me it was part of growing up." Aunt Clara didn't speak right away. She sat down across from her, the table between them now, empty but for that one flyer. Then she leaned forward and rested her elbows on her knees, voice low, steady. "You've been trying to walk quiet. I get that you wanted to prove something, that you're better than all this, that you don't need to fight to be strong." Maya said nothing, but sometimes, Aunt Clara continued, "people don't hear you until you make noise they can't ignore. I don't want to be like them. You're not like them," Aunt Clara said. "You never were, but you're going to remind them who they're messing with." Maya looked up slowly. "Tomorrow?" she asked. Aunt Clara nodded once. "Tomorrow." Maya walked to school without rushing, her steps even and steady, like every movement had already been decided before she left the house. Her aunt didn't say much that morning. She didn't need to. Maya had barely touched her breakfast, but it didn't matter. There was no emptiness left in her. Not the kind that came from hunger anyway. What she felt was clearer than pain, sharper than shame. It had settled into her bones overnight, and now it moved through her, like second nature. The parking lot was already filling with students by the time she stepped past the chain-link fence and onto the main walkway. The sun hadn't fully crested yet, but its light stretched low across the pavement, casting long shadows between parked cars and glinting off phones already pulled out for the morning scroll. She spotted them near the edge of the lot, just off to the side, where the bushes curved around toward the teacher's entrance. Madison, Brittany, and Tiffany standing with their arms crossed, waiting in plain sight, like they had nothing to hide. They saw her the moment she stepped off the sidewalk. Tiffany whispered something and smiled. Brittany snorted. Madison stepped forward just enough to block Maya's path, holding her phone like it was a microphone, and she was getting ready for a show. "Look who decided to come back," she said. "Wasn't sure you'd have the stomach for it. Then again, you've got more stomach than anybody here," Brittany cackled behind her. "She probably thinks we're scared now just because she cried to a teacher like a fat little victim." Maya didn't stop walking until she stood just a few feet away. Then she paused, not because she was intimidated, not because of their smirks or their phones, but because something in the air felt charged. Now heavier than before, the noise of the parking lot dulled as students nearby turned to look. Phones were already out. "I didn't cry," Maya said, her voice low and calm, her eyes locked on Madison's. Madison raised her eyebrows. "Really? Then what do you call storming off to the office with your pig flyer like some weak little charity case?" "I call it giving you a chance," Maya said, "but I guess you're not smart enough to take one." Tiffany let out a scoff. "You seriously think you scare us? Please, you're just a joke with legs." Brittany stepped forward now, circling slightly to Maya's right. "You got something to say?" "Say it," she said. "Or are you just going to stand there breathing hard and hoping we walk away?" Maya didn't flinch. Her hands stayed at her sides. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't raised a fist. "You had your fun," she said. "Now step aside." Madison rolled her eyes. Oh, now she's giving orders. Then her face changed, tightened just a little. The smirk stayed, but her pride started to catch up to her mouth. She couldn't back down, not with a crowd watching. You want me to move? She asked, stepping closer, chin lifting. Then move me. Maya didn't. She stood still, unmoving. Madison shoved her. It wasn't hard, not enough to knock her down, but enough to draw a reaction, enough to show everyone who started it. Phones shifted angles. The crowd's murmurs turned sharper. Maya took one step back to catch her balance. She blinked once, slowly. I'm not touching you, she said. But you touch me again. Madison shoved her a second time. Harder now. Both hands out, or what? Maya didn't answer. Brittany lunged from the side, trying to push her shoulder. Maya stepped out of the way, sharp and clean, but didn't retaliate. Tiffany hissed, Hit her already. But Maya still didn't move. Her voice didn't rise. I'm warning you, she said. Then Madison raised her hand. She meant to slap her. That much was obvious. The motion was wide and sloppy, all drama and no skill. But the moment that arm came swinging through the air, everything stopped. Maya caught her wrist mid-motion. Madison froze, eyes wide. Maya's grip tightened just enough to send a message. Not pain, just control. You want to fight, she said. Then fight. She released her hand and stepped back. Madison swung again, and that's when the real fight began. Madison's second swing came faster, her pride and panic folding together in a clumsy blur of movement. But she was too late to realize what she had walked into. Maya didn't dodge. She didn't retreat. She stepped into the arc of Madison's arm and let her body shift with practiced control, grabbing her elbow and pulling her forward just enough to break her balance, before sending a tight, sharp hook into her ribs. It wasn't wild. It wasn't angry. It was deliberate, and it was devastating. Madison stumbled backward with a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob, clutching her side as her phone hit the pavement and skidded across the lot. The crowd sucked in air like a single lung, voices lifting as the shock rippled through them. But Maya wasn't watching them. She was already turning, already catching the edge of movement as Brittany lunged with both hands raised like she was going to shove her again. She didn't get the chance. Maya's hand flashed up and slapped Brittany's arm away with a clean deflection before stepping in and delivering a body shot to her midsection tight. Compact all power behind the hips, Brittany's feet left the ground for a moment, breath flying out of her in a wheeze as she dropped forward. Maya stepped back as Brittany crumpled beside Madison, both of them groaning, hands on their stomachs, completely stunned by how fast it had happened. Tiffany was still standing. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open, one hand clutching her phone, the other hanging limp at her side. She hadn't moved until now, frozen between fear and disbelief. Then, like something inside her snapped, she rushed forward in a burst of panicked energy, swinging wild with her bag still on her shoulder, a desperate yell rising from her throat. Maya didn't wait for the strike to land. She ducked low, sidestepped with smooth footwork, and swept her leg across Tiffany's ankles in one clean motion. Tiffany's feet slid out from under her, and she hit the pavement with a yelp that cut off mid-air, her back slapping hard against the ground. Her phone flew from her hand, her bag twisted under her side. She lay there dazed, chest heaving, face flushed with pain and confusion. All around them, the crowd had pulled into a wide circle. Some students frozen. Others with phones up and recording every second. No one stepped in. No one tried to help. No one even shouted for a teacher. They just watched, caught in the silent awe that only came when something you thought would never happen had just torn itself into the open. Maya stood at the center shoulders, steady, chest rising with slow breaths. She didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She didn't chase them down or deliver more than was needed. She stood like she just finished sparring at her aunt's gym, controlled, alert, but perfectly calm. The bruises wouldn't come until later. The swelling, the fear, the shame, all of that belonged to the girls on the ground. Madison tried to push herself up, but her arm shook and gave out. Brittany rolled to her side, coughing dryly. Tiffany groaned and clutched her back, wincing like every movement was a reminder of what she never saw coming. Then came the teachers. Two of them emerged from the building at once, shouting for everyone to back away, waving their arms to scatter the crowd. The assistant principal followed close behind, confusion etched into his face as he took in the scene. The three girls on the pavement. the silent students with their phones, and Maya standing alone, untouched and unbothered in the middle. "What happened here?" one of the teachers demanded. Nobody answered at first. Then someone in the back said quietly, "They jumped her." She defended herself. The teacher looked at Maya, then at the girls still trying to sit up. The assistant principal stepped forward, his voice tight, trying to regain control. "Maya Anderson," he said, "come with me now." She nodded, picked up her backpack without looking at the crowd, and walked calmly past them toward the building. No one reached out to stop her. No one blocked her path. Even the ones who had mocked her the day before said nothing now. They moved aside, faces lowered, phones still rolling but hands trembling slightly. Inside the office, the atmosphere changed. The front desk assistant stood frozen as Maya walked in with the assistant principal behind her. The secretary's eyes flicked down to the bruises blooming across Maya's knuckles and said nothing. They led her into the same room as before. Principal Harrison was already waiting. He looked up from his computer as the door opened, his expression flat but tight at the corners. "Sit down," he said. Maya did. "I'm told you were involved in a fight," he said, opening a folder that hadn't been touched. "I was attacked," she replied. "I defended myself." He didn't respond immediately. He looked down, pretending to read something, then finally met her eyes. "You're suspended," he said, "pending a full review." Maya didn't flinch. "Okay." Outside that room, the footage had already left the school grounds. It was bouncing from phone to phone, being uploaded, shared, commented on, replayed. No one had edited it. No one needed to. The images were clear. Maya standing still while Madison shoved her, Brittany charging with both hands, Tiffany flailing wild, and then all three of them dropping one by one in the span of seconds. Maya didn't know any of that yet. She just sat still in the chair, staring forward, unshaken. For the first time since she arrived at Maplewood High, the silence around her didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. By the time Maya stepped out of the principal's office, with her suspension letter folded neatly in her pocket, the video had already spread far beyond the school's walls. Someone had uploaded it before first period even began, captioned with a simple line. She warned them. It wasn't edited or cut for drama. There were no filters, no sound effects, no slow motion, just shaky footage from 3 angles showing a group of girls surrounding one student making threats, throwing the first shove, and then hitting the ground, one after the other, clean and hard, under hands that never moved with panic. Only purpose. The comments came fast. Why did they press her first? She told them not to touch her. "This ain't a fight. This is a defense class." Students who'd stayed quiet for weeks now had something to say. Some anonymously posted that they'd seen the flyers, seen the lunchroom cruelty, heard the pig noises in gym and the candy wrappers in her locker. One girl uploaded a blurred shot of the flyer, captioned, "We all saw this in second period, teacher ignored it." Another posted a clip from gym class weeks ago where Brittany made snorting sounds as Maya ran laps and a boy on the bleachers laughed hard enough to drop his phone. The video had always been there. It just hadn't mattered until now. Local news picked it up before lunch. The headline was simple: "Student suspended after beating bullies. Self-defense or overreaction." By the afternoon, Maya's name was trending. Her Aunt Clara found out the same way everyone else did, through a coworker who marched into the gym with her phone in hand, wide-eyed, saying, "Clara, is this your niece?" The clip played without sound, but the image was clear. Maya in the parking lot, surrounded, Maya being shoved, Maya holding her ground, Maya striking with force that came not from anger, but precision. The clip ended with the 3 girls on the ground and Maya standing above them, like the ground had always belonged to her. Aunt Clara said nothing at first. She watched the video once, then again before reaching for her keys. She left the gym early, drove straight to the school, and walked through the office without asking for permission. When she stepped into the front office, the secretary froze mid-keystroke. Aunt Clara asked to speak to Principal Harrison. Her voice was even. Her face was unreadable. She was told to wait. She didn't. She walked to the door, opened it, and found him sitting behind the same desk that had once dismissed Maya, like she didn't matter. "You suspended her?" Aunt Clara asked. Harrison looked up startled, but recovered quickly. "I did. A temporary measure. There's a process we must follow." "Is that so?" Aunt Clara replied, her tone flat. He shifted slightly in his chair, already defensive. "Miss Anderson, I understand your concern, but there are policies in place. Regardless of context, physical altercations are not tolerated." "Your niece defended herself," Aunt Clara said, cutting him off without raising her voice. "After being harassed for weeks after you ignored every warning sign, you had a chance to step in. You chose not to." Harrison folded his hands. "It's not that simple. It never is for girls like her, is it?" Aunt Clara said, leaning forward. "But now the whole city's watching. So you tell me what happens when everyone else sees what you didn't care to look at." He didn't answer. She left before he could. Outside the school, reporters were beginning to gather. A local station van idled near the crosswalk. Microphones waited at the curb. Maya wasn't home yet, and Aunt Clara wasn't going to let them corner her. She issued a short statement to one camera. Nothing dramatic, just clear. She asked for help. She was told to toughen up. She was mocked, attacked, humiliated. Then she stood her ground. "Now everyone wants to talk. Good. Let's talk." That was all it took. Parents started calling the school board. Some were angry that their children had been present. Others wanted answers about the flyer, the taunting the teachers who stood by. One mother said her son came home crying, not because of the fight, but because he realized he had laughed along with it weeks before and didn't stop it. By the end of the day, the district had released a formal statement. "We are reviewing the incident and all surrounding reports. Student safety is our highest priority." But no one believed that teachers started whispering in the break room. One counselor, Chloe, told a colleague she'd flagged the bullying weeks ago, and nothing was done. A substitute teacher admitted she saw wrappers being thrown in the cafeteria and chose not to escalate. The silence was cracking one person at a time, because now the story had witnesses. Now there was proof. Maya stayed home the next day. She sat at the kitchen table with her aunt phone off, eyes focused on the window while the world spun around her name. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Every message that came in, every headline, every reposted video told the story louder than she ever could. Aunt Clara passed her a plate and said simply, "Eat. You've got to keep your strength." Maya nodded and picked up her fork. Outside, the world had started to notice her. Inside, for the first time in a long while, she felt still. The calls didn't stop after the first day. They came in waves, some from reporters, some from strangers, but more and more from parents. Some furious, some apologetic, others demanding to know why their kids hadn't said anything sooner. But beneath the noise, something else had begun to take root. A slow unraveling inside the school, quiet and careful, but spreading like a crack in glass. Teachers who had stayed silent were now being questioned. Screenshots and videos from previous weeks started surfacing. And in the center of it all, Maya's name kept rising, no longer as the girl who got mocked, but as the girl who finally fought back. The school board announced an investigation. Superintendent Lamb scheduled interviews with staff and students. A quiet internal audit began behind closed doors. It wasn't a confession, it was a shield, a way to say they were doing something before they were forced to admit how much they had ignored, but not everyone was interested in reflection. Late Saturday morning, Aunt Clara opened the door to find two women and a man standing on her porch, their faces tight with anger and eyes already scanning the house like they were looking for something to blame. She knew their type before they even opened their mouths. Suburb-polished, expensive sunglasses tucked into collars, posture that screamed control. The woman in front. Madison's mother didn't bother with a greeting. "Your niece assaulted my daughter," she said, voice sharp enough to cut air. Aunt Clara didn't move. She held the door steady with one hand, the other resting calmly at her side. "She defended herself," she replied. "She put her in the hospital." the second woman snapped. Brittany's mother eyes glossy with fury. A cracked rib and a concussion. You think that's just defense? The man, Tiffany's father, stepped forward, voice deeper but no less pointed. She's lucky we haven't pressed charges. Behind them, a car idled in the driveway. Maya, who had been helping in the backyard, came around the side of the house and froze when she saw them. Her hands were still dusty from the soil, her hoodie sleeves rolled to the elbows. The parents turned toward her immediately. You think this makes you some kind of hero? Madison's mother demanded. You attacked 3 girls in front of the whole school. Din. You think that makes you brave? Maya didn't answer. You're not brave, Brittany's mother hissed. You're violent, you're dangerous, and you don't belong in a school with other kids. Aunt Clara stepped outside, now shutting the door gently behind her. Say whatever you came to say to me, she said, voice calm, but edged. You don't speak to her. Then maybe you should have taught her better. Tiffany's father said, instead of teaching her how to fight like a street thug. She knows how to protect herself, Aunt Clara said, because girls like yours have been taught how to humiliate without consequences. Madison's mother shook her head. You don't get to spin this. You raised a bully and now everyone thinks our girls are monsters. They made themselves monsters, Aunt Clara replied. Maya didn't put those flyers up. She didn't throw wrappers in lockers or mock people in gym class. She didn't start filming and laughing when someone was hurting. All she did was stop pretending she could take it. You should be ashamed, Brittany's mother spat. If it were my daughter who'd done that to someone, I'd drag her to every house in town to apologize. Aunt Clara took one step closer. If your daughters had apologized instead of escalating this, never would have happened. But they pushed, they shoved, they swung first, and now you're here trying to rewrite it. You think this ends well for her? Madison's mother asked. This attention won't last. People forget, but our daughters will remember, and so will we. Maya, who had remained still the whole time, finally spoke. Good, she said. Remember it exactly how it happened. The parents turned back toward her, eyes narrowing. I warned them, she said. I asked them to stop. I walked away. I gave them every chance. They made their choice. Madison's mother stepped forward, like she wanted to say more, but something in Maya's face stopped her. Not anger, not smugness, just certainty. Tiffany's father straightened his shirt and glanced back at the car. This isn't over, he muttered. Aunt Clara smiled slightly. No, it's just getting started. They left without another word. The next day, a formal complaint was filed. 3, actually each from a different household, each demanding disciplinary review and threatening legal action. But the videos wouldn't go away. The public had seen too much, and every new accusation only led more people to look deeper into what the school had allowed. In the following week, 3 students testified in a closed-door meeting with the school board. All 3 confirmed Maya's story. One of them, a sophomore named Chloe, brought printouts, screen grabs of group chats, images of the flyers, even a video taken days before the fight, showing Brittany making pig noises as Maya walked past. The school board had no choice but to expand the investigation. A counselor who had filed a complaint about bullying 2 months prior was quietly asked for a statement. A substitute teacher admitted that she'd raised concerns about locker room behavior and was told not to stir the pot. Patterns were emerging, each thread pulling another loose. The principal hadn't commented publicly, but his silence had started to speak louder than anything else. The school board meeting took place on a Thursday evening behind glass doors in a room that usually held planning discussions and budget talks, not public scrutiny. But that night, the room was packed. Parents sat shoulder to shoulder in stiff chairs, some holding printouts of the video, others with folded arms and tight mouths. Teachers stood at the back, near the walls, eyes low, but listening. Reporters lined the far side cameras tucked against their shoulders. And behind the board members' polished table, Superintendent Lamb cleared his throat, adjusted his papers, and read from a prepared statement. "We are here," he said, "because our system failed to protect a student." No one interrupted. The week leading to the meeting had been relentless. Evidence piled up faster than they could respond. Students submitted statements describing what they'd seen and heard. parents forwarded screenshots from group chats. Even teachers, quiet at first, began speaking in confidence, describing a culture where certain students were allowed to do as they pleased so long as they came from the right families, smiled in the right places, and didn't draw too much attention to themselves. A senior math teacher admitted that complaints about Tiffany and her circle were dismissed at staff meetings. A janitor turned in a stack of confiscated flyers he'd collected from the bathrooms over 2 weeks, unsure at the time what to do with them, but now relieved he hadn't thrown them away. The board didn't make a dramatic announcement that night. There was no sweeping declaration, just a slow unraveling of decisions that piece by piece began to rebuild what had been broken. Principal Harrison submitted his resignation the next morning. It wasn't framed as punishment. The official letter cited personal reasons and the need for new leadership, but everyone understood. His face didn't appear on the morning announcements again. His nameplate was taken down by noon. That same day, the disciplinary committee reconvened to review Maya's suspension. After a private hearing with her and Aunt Clara, and after reviewing the full extent of the footage, the board voted unanimously to overturn it. The next message came to Aunt Clara by email, short and formal. Maya Anderson's suspension is lifted, effective immediately. Please contact the office to arrange her return. We deeply regret the circumstances that led to this outcome. It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. Maya didn't react when she read it. She sat at the kitchen table, hands folded around a glass of water, her aunt reading over her shoulder. When she finished, she passed the phone back and said simply, "I'll go back Monday." Aunt Clara nodded. "You ready?" Maya looked out the window, then back at her plate. "I've always been ready. They just weren't." Meanwhile, the fallout continued. Madison, Brittany, and Tiffany were called in for individual review meetings with the district's disciplinary panel. Their families tried to argue context, emotional distress, provocation, even fear. But the evidence didn't bend. Footage, witness accounts, and prior complaints painted a picture too clear to dismiss. They were expelled by the end of the week. The decision didn't sit well with their parents, who gave carefully worded interviews to sympathetic outlets, trying to spin the narrative. But public opinion had already turned. The footage had gone too far. The story had grown legs, and Maya had become something no one expected her to be: undeniable. When she returned to school that Monday, the halls weren't silent, but they were different. Whispers followed her, but not the cruel kind. Students moved out of her way, not out of fear, but with a kind of guarded respect. Teachers greeted her with quiet nods. Even those who'd once ignored her presence now looked up when she passed. She didn't smile. She didn't slow down. She moved through the building like she belonged in it. And for the first time, no one dared challenge that. In homeroom, a girl who hadn't spoken to her all year leaned over and said softly, "I saw what they did to you. I should have said something." Maya didn't answer right away. She just looked at the girl, not with gratitude, not with judgment, just a quiet, even stare. Then she said, "Next time, don't wait." In the cafeteria, she sat at the same table near the vending machines, alone again, but not because she was being pushed out. No one sat too close, but no one threw anything either. No one whispered behind her back, or made animal noises, or left wrappers in her path. The air was still waiting. The school's new anti-bullying initiative was announced the following week. Posters went up around the halls. New staff were hired. Teachers were assigned mandatory equity training. A student-led diversity council was formed and given an official advisor. None of it happened quickly. None of it erased what had already been done. But the changes started, tangible ones, and they weren't just for show. Not this time. Maya didn't volunteer for the council. She didn't join the assemblies. She didn't need to. Her presence had already done the talking. Her silence had already said everything. By the end of that first full week back, her name wasn't just a headline anymore. It was a reminder, a lesson, a shift, and it had weight. The changes inside the school had settled like new furniture. Clean, fresh, but not entirely comfortable yet. Posters lined the walls with messages about dignity and respect. Teachers paused longer when walking past groups in the halls. Students spoke softer when certain names were mentioned. Maya had returned to class quiet as ever, but the weight around her had shifted. She didn't need to announce anything. She didn't need a crowd. Her silence held space now, and even those who once rolled their eyes at her presence now sat straighter when she passed. But there were places the school couldn't protect her from. It happened on a Thursday just past 400, when most students had cleared out and the parking lot had emptied down to a handful of cars. Maya had stayed late working on a project with her biology teacher. When she stepped out the side exit, the wind had picked up and the clouds were already settling low, stretching gray across the sky in a warning that matched the knot forming slowly in her chest. She didn't hear them right away, not until she reached the sidewalk and passed the side fence, halfway between the gym and the staff lot. That's when the voice cut through the air, sharp and familiar. "Well, look who's still walking around like she's something." Maya stopped mid-step. Madison stood leaning against the metal fence, arms folded, expression tight with something far darker than mockery. Brittany and Tiffany flanked her, hoodies up, posture tense. Their clothes were different now. No more uniforms, no more polished appearances, but their eyes burned the same. This wasn't a performance for attention. This was personal. Maya stayed where she was facing them. "You know," Tiffany said, stepping forward with her hands still in her pockets, "we gave you a warning, but you just had to keep walking around like a queen." "I'm not the one who came back to a school I don't belong to," Maya said, voice steady, eyes locked. "You don't belong here either," Brittany snapped. "Just because they're scared of you now doesn't mean you deserve it." "You came here to say that?" Maya asked. "No," Madison said, stepping in now. "We came here to shut you up." And that's when they moved. Madison lunged first, swinging low with an open hand slap that was meant to catch Maya by surprise. But Maya had seen it coming. Not just in her stance, not just in Madison's clenched jaw, but in the way the three of them spread apart, like they were setting a trap they didn't know she could read. She ducked under the swing and pivoted out of reach, her hand rising not to punch, not yet, but to block Tiffany's shoulder as she tried to rush from the side. They weren't coordinated. They weren't fighters. They were angry and sloppy and full of resentment. But this time, they didn't hesitate. Brittany came next, trying to grab her by the arm, and Maya turned, pulled free, and delivered a blow to the ribs that sent Brittany stumbling backward into the fence with a choked cry. Madison swung again, but Maya caught her wrist and twisted, forcing her downward before pushing her away. Tiffany tried to tackle her, screaming now, but Maya sidestepped and let her momentum carry her straight into the pavement. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a message. They didn't care who saw. They just wanted revenge. But Maya wasn't the same girl who walked through the parking lot with her head down, hoping to be ignored. She wasn't quiet anymore because she was scared. She was quiet because she didn't need noise to prove who she was. Madison lunged again, wild with frustration, and Maya met her with a straight punch to the jaw. Madison dropped. Brittany stayed down, still wheezing. Tiffany tried to rise, but Maya stepped closer, standing over her. "Don't get up," she said. "Not unless you want it worse." For a second, no one moved. Then the silence broke with the sound of a car door slamming in the distance and footsteps approaching, fast. A teacher who had stayed late stepped out from behind the gym doors, eyes wide as she caught sight of the scene. Her voice rose sharply across the lot. "Stop! All of you, don't move!" Maya stepped back immediately, hands open, breathing hard, but still in control. The girls didn't say anything. They didn't try to explain. They just sat where they fell, bruised and breathing heavy, while the teacher pulled out her phone and called the office. Security arrived first, then an assistant principal, then a few minutes later the school resource officer. Questions were asked, notes were taken, names were written down. Maya didn't raise her voice. She told them what happened. She didn't try to embellish. She didn't try to soften it either. The officer looked at the other girls, then back at Maya, then down at the scraped pavement and the bruises starting to show. "This isn't a school issue anymore," he said. "This is going to be police business." Maya didn't blink. "Okay," she said. It wasn't the first time they'd tried to break her, but now someone else would be writing the report. The police interviews started that same evening. First at the school, then at the station. No one was taken in handcuffs, but it was clear from the way the officers spoke that this was no longer being handled as schoolyard drama. Maya sat in a private room with Aunt Clara beside her. The officer's questions measured but firm, each one repeating the timeline, the location, the number of people, the words exchanged before the first swing. Maya answered every question without hesitation, without rushing, her tone level and her gaze steady. Aunt Clara didn't interrupt, didn't offer input unless asked. She just sat with her arms folded and her eyes fixed on the officer, like she was taking mental notes of every sentence spoken. The officer closed his notebook after an hour. "You're not under investigation," he said. "From the footage and what we've gathered so far, you acted in self-defense again, but this time it's different. They were expelled, they came back. That makes this criminal trespassing at minimum." Maya nodded slowly. "I didn't go looking for them. We know about tomorrow, no," the officer said, "but now they've crossed a different line." Across town, another conversation was unfolding. This one behind closed doors in the offices of the bullies' parents, where lawyers had been called in and voices raised over phone calls and paperwork. The moment the police became involved, the tone shifted from indignant to cautious. It was one thing to spin a school fight into victimhood. It was something else entirely when charges were on the table: trespassing, assault, intent to harm. The labels didn't sound like teenage mischief anymore. By Friday morning, the story had made another leap in coverage. Expelled students return. Attack, teen again. Police now involved. The article ran with screenshots from the second video, one of Maya blocking a strike, another of Brittany on the ground near the fence. Commentary flooded in across platforms, sharper, now angrier. People wanted accountability not just from the girls, but from the families that had allowed it to escalate. Twice. Maya walked through school that day with more eyes on her than ever. Some were supportive, some uncertain, some just waiting for something to happen next. But the difference now was that no one dared speak around her like they had before. Whispers fell short. Phones stayed lowered. The students who once circled her to mock now gave her space, not out of fear, but because the balance had changed and everyone could feel it. In third period, the teacher paused the lesson briefly to make a comment that wasn't in the textbook. "I just want to say," she began carefully, "that we should be thinking about what we allow to go unchecked, that silence isn't neutral, it's permission." She didn't say Maya's name, but no one had to ask who she meant. By the end of the day, Maya was called to the office, not by the principal, but by a member of the district's legal team who had come in to oversee next steps. She entered a small meeting room with her aunt, who had arrived minutes before and sat across from two officials. One from student safety, one from compliance, both looking tired, but serious. They spoke for almost an hour, asking for details that the police had already taken, but wanting their own version for internal records. So there was no suggestion of punishment this time. No mention of suspension or code of conduct violations, only confirmation of the timeline of who had said what, of how Maya had responded, and when. "We want to make sure you feel safe returning to campus." The woman from student safety said. "I'm not scared of them," Maya replied. "No," the woman said, her voice softer now. "But it's our job to make sure you don't have to be..." Maud. Outside that room, the school board had already started discussing what additional measures would need to be taken. The former principal's name resurfaced questions about what signs he ignored, what patterns he failed to report. An internal audit revealed missed warning signs, dismissed staff concerns, and records of complaints that had quietly disappeared from files. Meanwhile, the police department submitted their report to the district attorney. 3 separate charges were filed, one for criminal trespassing, one for attempted assault, and one for conspiracy to cause harm on school grounds. The words sounded heavy in court language, but they matched exactly what the second video showed. Maya didn't cheer when she heard the news. She didn't smile. She sat at home with the report open on her aunt's tablet, reading through the language, slowly making sure she understood every word. "They're going to have to stand in court now?" she asked. "Yes," Aunt Clara said. "There'll be a hearing." Maya nodded. "Good." There was no celebration, no sense of victory, just the stillness that came with finally being believed. Outside, the air had started to shift. The same students who once avoided eye contact had begun to speak. Not to Maya always, but around her carefully, like they were testing how to exist in this new climate where silence wasn't an option and cruelty didn't stay hidden. One student left a note on Maya's locker that said, "We saw it. I'm sorry it took this long." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The damage had been done, but so had the change, and it wasn't done yet. The hearing date was set for the following month, but the fallout started much sooner. The girls' families, once loud in their defense, had gone quiet. After the charges were announced, the press releases stopped, the social media posts were deleted. Even their lawyers began advising a different tone. Less blame, more regret. But the damage was already done. The second video had erased any doubt that lingered after the first. Whatever story they tried to spin now sounded like noise. Maya still went to school every day, just as she had before. She walked the same halls, sat in the same classrooms, kept her head level and her voice measured, but the conversations around her had shifted again. Not just about her, but about the school, the district, and the long list of questions nobody could keep ignoring. A local advocacy group began organizing meetings with parents. Students started writing essays for their English classes on school accountability, on bystander silence, on how culture is shaped, not just by rules, but by what gets overlooked. The district superintendent called a press conference. Midweek, standing stiff in front of the same podium that had once been used for announcing sports achievements and honor roll updates. This time, the subject was different. "We failed to act swiftly," he said. "And because of that, a student was harmed multiple times on our watch. Moving forward, we are implementing a third-party review of all harassment complaints filed within the last 3 years. Every unresolved issue will be reopened, and every failure to follow procedure will be addressed." It wasn't a complete apology, but it wasn't a deflection either, and that mattered. The next day, Maya was pulled into another meeting, this time at the district office. Aunt Clara came with her, like always. They sat across from a new face, a compliance investigator from the county office sent in to handle the legal crossover now that the situation was straddling both education and criminal codes. "We're not here to ask the same questions," the investigator said. "We're here because your name's been tied to something much bigger than a fight." Maya didn't react. She just listened. The investigator continued. "Your school had complaints about bullying that never reached our department. We have reason to believe some of those records were buried or ignored, and you're not the only student who was targeted." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. "So what happens now? We build a case. We interview more students. We find out how deep this goes." Aunt Clara leaned forward. "And what do you need from her?" "Nothing she hasn't already done," the investigator said. She spoke up. She told the truth. That's more than most people manage. Later that evening, Aunt Clara got a call. This time, not from the school, not from a reporter, but from Madison's father. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He asked for a meeting. "We need to talk," he said. "Not about the girls, about how this ends." Aunt Clara agreed to meet, but not in private. They sat outside a cafe 2 blocks from the gym in full view of anyone passing by. Maya didn't attend. She didn't need to. This wasn't her conversation. He came alone, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, face drawn with exhaustion. He didn't touch the coffee he ordered. He didn't look Aunt Clara in the eye for the first few minutes. "We're not trying to avoid accountability," he said. "We just want to keep things from getting worse." "They already did," Aunt Clara said. "Your daughter put her hands on mine twice. She made a mistake." He said, "She made a choice," Aunt Clara replied. "And so did you every time you ignored who she was becoming." He leaned back and rubbed his face. "Lawyers are telling us to go for a deal, plead out, reduce the charges, but I wanted to ask off the record what it would take to make this right." Aunt Clara shook her head slowly. "You're too late for that kind of talk," she said. "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth, and the truth needs to run its course." He nodded, defeated. "Then I guess we're going to court,"
Carl.
You are, she said, but Maya's already won. The next morning, word spread that Madison's family had offered a formal apology through their attorney. It was tight, legal, full of polished phrasing, regret for the events that transpired, acknowledgement of harm, caused intent to cooperate moving forward. But it wasn't received the way they hoped. The community had seen too much, and they weren't ready to forgive packaged statements. Maya read the letter once, then handed it to her aunt. Without comment, Aunt Clara asked, "What do you think?" Maya shrugged. "They're not sorry. They're scared." And she wasn't wrong. At school, teachers started bringing in outside facilitators to lead classroom discussions. Students talked openly about what they saw, what they let happen, and what they didn't want to repeat. One senior said aloud in government class, "We talk about rights all day long, but we never talk about what it means when schools look the other way." The teacher didn't answer. Maya didn't say anything either. She didn't need to. The silence that used to surround her had changed again. Now it wasn't a tool used to shrink her. Now it was a space she controlled. The courthouse date settled into the town's calendar like a storm warning, visible, looming, and impossible to ignore. Whispers spread across school hallways, and dinner tables carried in text messages and side conversations between parents outside grocery stores. It was no longer a local drama. It had become a mirror that people were afraid to look into. The questions had stopped being just about Maya or the girls who jumped her. Now people were asking what kind of community had let this happen. In the first place, Maya walked through it all the same way she had from the beginning. Steady, quiet, grounded. She kept her head up, kept her work turned in on time, kept her steps unshaken even when people turned to stare as she passed. The new respect she carried wasn't comfortable or warm. It didn't come with smiles or praise. It came with distance, with caution, with the kind of silence that followed someone who had exposed something ugly in a place that wanted to pretend it was clean. But Maya had never cared about comfort. She had spent too long learning how to carry herself through spaces that weren't made for her to ask for ease. Now, outside of school, the pressure was closing in on the three families who had once laughed at the thought of consequences. Brittany's older brother, a college football player, had his scholarship reconsidered after photos of him posing with the girls surfaced online. Tiffany's father, a local insurance agent who once boasted about knowing the mayor, found himself fielding quiet phone calls from clients asking if his name would be in the papers again. Madison's mother, once president of the school's booster club, had stepped down without a word. Her name no longer appeared in PTA emails. What began as arrogance had soured into paranoia. And then the threats started. It began with a voicemail. No name, just a voice that said, "Keep pushing and it won't end in court." Maya's aunt reported it immediately. The officer who took the report looked genuinely unsettled. Then came a note slipped into their mailbox. Words typed and unsigned. "You made your point. Back off. Let it die." Aunt Clara handed it straight to the detective assigned to the case. No hesitation, no panic, just a clean chain of custody, and a face that said she wouldn't be moved. Maya didn't say much about it. She sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her. The envelope still sealed in an evidence bag on the kitchen table. Her eyes were steady focused, not on the threat itself, but what it confirmed. "They're scared," she said. Finally, that means they're losing. In the days that followed, more fractures began to show. A student who had once laughed behind Maya's back now avoided eye contact completely. Another quietly asked if she needed help with her project in English class. A few younger students had started mimicking her silence, not out of fear, but because it gave them permission to stop pretending. And across the school, something deeper was beginning to shift. The counselor Chloe, who had once flagged the bullying and been ignored, was now helping lead weekly meetings with students who had experienced harassment. Teachers who had brushed things off before were now stepping in more quickly, asking questions, making notes. The changes weren't loud or flashy, but they were real, and they were because of her. But pressure builds even under progress. And one morning, just a week before the hearing, Maya stepped into the school lobby and found a group of students standing beside the lockers. 3 girls, none of whom had ever spoken to her directly, holding up their phones with a flyer on the screen. Another fake eating contest, a new one, different title, same mockery. No one had printed it. It was being shared quietly through airdrop and private group chats. Someone had tried to start it all over again. Maya looked at the image. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She just turned and walked to the office, calm and clear. This time there was no hesitation. The dean met her halfway. The flyer was pulled from 3 phones on the spot. The student responsible, an underclassman from another grade, was suspended before third period ended. And within 24 hours, the district released a statement calling the incident part of an ongoing effort to intimidate a student engaged in legal proceedings and promising full cooperation with law enforcement. Maya sat in the back of the library when she heard about the suspension. Her shoulders didn't move. She didn't react. She had learned not to take comfort in fast actions. What mattered wasn't punishment. What mattered was that they didn't think she'd fold. That night, as the sun dropped low and shadows stretched long across the living room floor, Aunt Clara sat beside her and looked out the window. "They're going to keep trying," she said. "Even after the hearing, people like that don't stop easy." Maya nodded once. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, and she meant it. Whatever came next, she would face it the way she always had, head on, steady, unshaken, with nothing to prove and nothing to hide. The next time they said her name, they would remember why they'd started whispering in the first place. The courtroom was smaller than people expected, tucked into a second-floor corner of the county courthouse, with faded chairs, dull walls, and a clock that ticked too loudly once everyone had settled in. But what the room lacked in size, it made up for in weight. Reporters lined the back wall, notebooks ready, but cameras forbidden. A few parents sat in silence, near the middle row, some with crossed arms, others with folded hands and tight expressions. School administrators were seated near the side, flanked by district representatives who had learned by now to let their attorneys do most of the talking. Maya sat at the front beside her aunt, her hands folded neatly in her lap, not nervous, not excited, just ready. The girls sat across the aisle, separated by their respective lawyers. None of them looking at her. Their posture said everything, shoulders pulled, in eyes lowered. Not one of them carried the smugness they once flaunted. They had lost that when the police report was filed. What remained now was dread. The hearing began with a soft-spoken judge who read through the charges without drama: criminal trespassing, attempted assault, and coordinated harassment on school grounds while knowingly barred from the premises. The phrasing was formal, but Maya knew what it meant. It meant they came back when they weren't supposed to. It meant they laid hands on her again, and this time it meant someone else. Not just her had finally said that was enough. Each defense attorney took their turn. One leaned heavily on their client's age. Another cited emotional instability triggered by expulsion. A third tried to frame the second confrontation as a misunderstanding, a volatile encounter between teenagers spun out of proportion. The judge listened without interrupting. The room held its breath without moving. Then came Maya's turn. She didn't take the stand to cry. She didn't take it to lecture. She spoke clearly without rushing, answering every question with the same calm she had shown in every hallway, every meeting, every video that had gone viral. Before anyone learned her name, she described the first flyer. She described the candy wrappers, the mocking voices in gym, the threats, the laughter, the silence from teachers who didn't want to be involved. She described how she tried to walk away again and again until walking away only gave them more permission. She ended with one line that silenced even the sound of the clock. "I did everything I could, not to fight them, but they came looking for me." "Twice." The judge nodded slowly. "You're not on trial today," he said. "And for what it's worth, I believe you." There was no applause, no outburst, just the still, undeniable shift of truth settling into the room. After a brief recess, the judge returned and delivered his ruling. All 3 girls were found guilty on the trespassing and assault charges. The court declined to move the case into juvenile detention, but each girl was sentenced to probation, mandatory counseling, and enrollment in an alternative education program. The judge ordered them to stay 500 feet from Maya at all times and barred them from setting foot on any school grounds within the district. Violations would result in immediate arrest. Their families sat frozen, their attorneys whispering their expressions, blank with shock. They tried to hide behind forced composure, but the consequences were real now. Permanent records, legal restrictions, a clear message not just to them, but to anyone watching. Maya stood when it was over. She didn't smile, she didn't celebrate. She walked out with her aunt beside her, straight-backed and silent, the same way she had walked into the building on her own terms. Outside, the sky was clear. Reporters called out asking for comments, for reactions, for statements. Maya said nothing. Aunt Clara answered with a short line and nothing more. She told the truth, and the truth held. In the weeks that followed, the aftershocks rippled through the school and beyond. The district implemented new reporting systems, anonymous complaint portals, quarterly reviews. A full-time equity officer was hired. Teachers began receiving training they should have had years ago. The old culture of letting things slide, of looking the other way, didn't disappear overnight, but it started to lose its footing. And Maya, the girl who had once been mocked behind her back and ignored when she spoke, became the name people mentioned when they talked about change. Not as a symbol, not as a cautionary tale, but as the girl who stood up, held her ground, and didn't flinch, even when it was easier to stay quiet. She didn't ask for attention, but she got it, and now nobody could take it back. It didn't happen all at once, but the silence around Maya changed shape. After the hearing, where it had once closed in on her like a wall, now it followed her like a boundary. People knew not to cross. She still walked the same hallways, past the same lockers, sat in the same classrooms, but the energy that once met her at every turn, mocking glances, whispered jokes, long stares filled with judgment, had gone quiet. Not because people had suddenly become kinder, but because they had been forced to see her, not as a stereotype, not as a target, but as someone who had endured everything they threw at her and stayed standing. The school adjusted around her, bit by bit. Some teachers changed the way they moved through the building. They lingered longer in the halls between periods. They watched more closely during lunch. They called things out that they used to let pass. Students noticed conversations shifted. Some still didn't say anything, but now it was hesitation, not apathy, that held them back. Maya didn't talk much about the trial once it ended. She didn't bring it up in class or answer questions from kids who wanted details after staying quiet all semester. She let her silence say what needed to be said. Her presence alone was reminder enough, but there were moments, small ones, where the change felt real, like the day she found a handwritten note inside her locker, folded in half with neat blue ink on lined paper. It wasn't signed. Just a message. You made me realize I was part of the silence. I won't be again. She didn't know who wrote it. She didn't try to find out. She tucked it into her bag and kept walking. At home, life settled into a steadier rhythm. Her aunt still ran the gym, still came home with chalk on her hands and soreness in her shoulders. But now there was something new in the way she looked at Maya. Pride that had always been there, now tempered with a kind of respect that was no longer just protective. Aunt Clara had taught Maya how to fight with her hands, but Maya had taught herself how to fight without ever needing to strike first. Some nights they sat on the porch without talking, the quiet between them. Comfortable now, stretched out over the low hum of traffic and the occasional sound of neighborhood kids riding their bikes down the block. One night after the weather turned warm again, Aunt Clara handed Maya a cold bottle of water and said, "They'll write about you one day." Maya took the bottle, twisted the cap, and took a long drink before answering. "They already did," she said. But they didn't know me then, and she was right. The people who had written headlines, posted clips, left comments. They'd seen a girl fighting back, standing her ground, refusing to be humiliated. But they hadn't seen the days before the camera came out. The weight of holding it in the nights of wondering if it would ever stop. The bruises no one bothered to look for. The strength it took to show up anyway. Now they knew. As for the girls, Madison, Brittany, and Tiffany, their lives had taken a sharp turn. They were no longer welcome at Maplewood or any school in the district. They were transferred to an alternative program. Far across town, stripped of their social standing, their reputations tarnished beyond quick repair. College applications would ask about their record. Job interviews would pull their names from search engines and see the articles. They weren't just suspended anymore. They were known, and for the first time, they would have to live with the weight of being watched. Maya didn't celebrate their downfall. She didn't need to. She had learned that justice wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. And now, finally, the scales were beginning to settle. Near the end of the semester, she stood outside the school building one afternoon, waiting for her aunt to pick her up. The sun hung low in the sky, spilling gold across the sidewalk, casting long shadows behind her. A group of younger students passed by freshmen, maybe laughing about something she couldn't hear. One of them turned, looked at her, and said quietly to the others, "That's her." They kept walking. No jokes followed, no laughter, just that one sentence spoken with something close to awe. Maya watched them go, then looked down at the steps beneath her feet. This place hadn't changed completely. It might never. But she had, and they all knew it.